all comedians are a little crazy, and you need crazy on that wall. Yeah. Will Smith wasn't pulled off stage, but comedian Nimesh Patel was literally pulled off stage during a performance at Columbia for a joke about how hard it is to be gay and black. Not an anti-gay joke, mind you, a pro-gay joke. But one of the event organizers walked on stage and said, "I don't think you're entitled to certain jokes you're making." Well, a sense of entitlement certainly is a big part of the problem here, but not on the part of the comedian. And that's the thing. The people who can't take a joke now aren't old ladies in the Bible Belt. They're Gen Z at elite colleges. Colleges where comedy goes to die. Kids used to go to college and lose their virginity. Now they go to lose their sense of humor.
Good morning. It's Thursday, Delta Force Thursday, August the 10th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Stuart-Varney, My Take, Jesse Waters, No Free Lunch, The Rape of the Mind, Byron-Donalds, Loeren-Boebert, Vivek-Ramaswamy, and Inside Delta Force. All that and more when I come back. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now there's no free lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
The curious task of economics is to demonstrate to men how little they really know about what they imagine they can design. To the naive mind that can conceive of order only as the product of deliberate arrangement, it may seem absurd that in complex conditions, order and adaptation to the unknown can be achieved more effectively by decentralizing decisions, and that a division of authority will actually extend the possibility of overall order. Yet, that decentralization actually leads to more information being taken into account. F.A. Hayek. The irony must not be lost on us. Those who not only do not claim to have adequate knowledge in the details of what they seek to control, but demonstrate their ignorance and inadequacy consistently for all to see, are the loudest proponents of granting the authority to control economic affairs to disinterested third parties. And perhaps I'm too focused on their disinterest, the lack of skin in the game, alignment, incentive, and knowledge, and not focused enough on the lack of competence. Choose your poison.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. So who is the true conservative? He is the person that has the courage of his convictions and is confident in what he knows. He is the person that understands that culture trumps politics. He's not selfish, but minds his own business. He does not go looking for trouble. He is alert. He curbs his curiosity, and he acts like an adult. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He is judgmental and moralizes. He refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why, rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American, and he is better than the socialist. He's a better friend, father, brother, family member, and a better person, period. You have to know that being a true conservative is best, or you are wasting your time. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little clip from Stuart-Varney.
He asked President Biden about Devon Archer's testimony. Watch this, please. Roll it.
There's this testimony now where one of your son's former business associates is claiming that you were on speakerphone a lot with them, talking business. Is that what?
Never talk business in anybody. And I know you'd have a lousy question.
Well, why is that a lousy question?
Because it's not true.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So Peter Doocy's a sissy. What he should have done, the President Biden has a weak spot so big he could hit it blindfolded. And what he should have done is simply ask the president, excuse me, are you throwing a temper tantrum because of your obvious cognitive impairment? And then watch the president choke. And every time you talk to the president or ask him a question and he comes up with a snotty response, which is every time, then you do the same thing. Excuse me, Mr. President, have you don't know because you have cognitive impairment? Are you throwing a temper tantrum because of your cognitive impairment? Are you copying an attitude because of your cognitive impairment? And you hammer this guy with this cognitive impairment, and it will shut him up as it should. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Stuart-Varney's My Take.
Now this. Any second thoughts from the Democrats about prosecuting Trump? Too late. They've launched. There's no going back. Even when there are headlines like this in the New York Times, quote, the prosecution of Trump may have terrible consequences. Oh, you can say that again. Jack Goldsmith wrote that, and he's a professor of law at Harvard. He doesn't mince words. Trump's behavior is reprehensible and possibly criminal, he says, but prosecuting him would leave the Justice Department irretrievably politicized. He says it would criminalize politics, lead to a tit-for-tat political prosecutions, and hanging over it all, the basic unfairness of a president using the machinery of government to put his opponent in jail. And that is in the New York Times, the Bible of the Democrat Party. The Biden team knows exactly what it's doing. They're in the business of keeping Biden in office for another term. That's a tough job when the Biden family has been credibly accused of gross financial corruption. To them, prosecuting Trump is just a campaign strategy, wonderful for bringing out Trump hatred. Now, pressed by Fox's Peter Doocy, the president again denied talking business with anyone, directly contradicting Devon Archer's sworn testimony. The campaign desperately needs to distract from this, and the best way of doing that is to prosecute Trump. But you don't defend democracy by bending and stretching the law in the middle of a presidential campaign. The Democrats should pay attention to Jack Goldsmith's opinion because prosecuting Trump will indeed have terrible consequences for us all. Second hour of Varney just getting started.
And that was Stu Varney's My Take. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the rape of the mind.
The retreat to automization. Introverted schizophrenics prefer the automatic, routine life of the asylum to life of the outside world. on the condition that they be allowed to indulge their private fantasies. They surrender utterly to self-defeatism. They never congregate in groups. They seldom talk with one another. Even when they do, they never have any real mutual contact. Each one lives in his own retreat. In the totalitarian myth, think, for instance, of Das Dritte Reich. In the psychological folklore of our mythical state, the vague fantasy of the technically perfected womb, the ideal nirvana, plays a tremendous role. In the world full of insecurities, a world requiring continual alert adjustment and readjustment, totalitaria creates the delusion of omnipotent, miraculous, ideal state, a state where, in its final form, every material need will be satisfied. Everything will be regulated, just as it was for the fetus in the womb. The land of bliss and equanimity, just as it is for the schizophrenic in the mental hospital. There is no social struggle, no mental struggle. The world moves like clockwork. There is no real interplay between people, no clash of opinions or beliefs. There is no emotional relationship between these womb fellows. Each exists as a separate number-bearing entity in the same filing system. In totalitaria, there is no faith in fellow men, no caritas, no love, because real relationships between men do not exist, just as they do not exist between schizophrenics. There is only faith in and subjection to the feeding system. And there is in every citizen a tremendous fear of being expelled from that system, a fear of being totally lost, comparable with the schizophrenic's feeling of rejection and fear of reality. In the midst of spiritual loneliness and isolation, there is the fear of still greater loneliness, more painful isolation. Without protective regulations from the outside, internal hell may break loose. Strong mechanical external order must be used to cover the internal chaos and approaching breakdown. We've had experience in post-war years with several refugees from the totalitarian world who broke down when they had to cope with a world of freedom where personal initiative was required. The fear of freedom brought them to a state of panic. They no longer had strong enough egos to build and maintain their defenses against the competitive demands of free democratic reality. As in schizophrenia, a maneuverable and individual ego cannot exist in totalitaria. In schizophrenia, the ego shrinks as a result of withdrawal. In totalitaria, as a result of constant merging in mass feelings. If such a shrunken ego should grow up with its own critical attitude, its needs for verification of facts and for understanding, it would then be beaten down as being treacherous and non-conforming. Totalitaria requires of its citizens complete subjection to and identification with the leader. It is this leader dominance that makes people nearly egoless, as they are in schizophrenia. This again may result in loss of control of hostile and destructive drives. Psychologists have seen this time and time again in what we can call the concentration camp psyche. When the victims first came to the camp, dedicated to their gradual extermination, most of them displayed a complete loss of self, an utter depersonalization, combined with apathy and loss of awareness. The same observations have been made among our POWs in Korea. Some concentration camp victims got better immediately after their return to a normal society. In others, this schizophrenic reaction of lost ego remained and, as we mentioned above, sometimes developed into a real psychosis.
That was The Retreat to Atomization from The Rape of the Mind by Joost-Meerlo, MD. Back in a minute. Thank you. Jesse Waters with some breaking news.
Orchestrating a massive illegal cover-up. Trump is headed for trial next year for January 6th related charges, and he's going to have subpoena power, which gives him the right to access critical documents and videos pertaining to the time period. That means the January 6th committee, whose 2-year investigation produced thousands and thousands of documents, transcript, and hours of deposition videos, the good, the bad, and the ugly, will be legally required to turn over whatever materials Trump requests. And as you know, Primetime does not believe in coincidences. Yesterday, we uncovered the January 6th committee has destroyed almost 50% of their evidence. The Democrat-run January 6th committee is missing 1.5 terabytes of data. This is an enormous amount of material. Records of the Capitol Hill security failures, video of Trump cabinet depositions, emails, text messages, gone. And who knows what else they deleted. Remember, the January 6th committee only aired and only reported what Democrats wanted you to know about January 6th. Anything they didn't want you to know about the 6th wasn't made public, and it looks like it was destroyed. We might never get to the bottom of January 6th because the January 6th committee destroyed their evidence. This has never happened before in Congress. The Benghazi committee, the 9/11 committees, all of that evidence is warehoused. None of it was deleted. Now, once the congressional investigation's completed, all of the information's transferred to the archives. And congressional sources tell Primetime that losing or destroying committee evidence is not at all common practice. And it's also a crime to destroy congressional documents. It's a felony. That means the January 6th committee, if Trump wins this election, could be charged with felonies for destroying congressional materials. Now, for 2 years, Democrats conveyed to us they only care about two things: preserving documents and January 6th. So why would they destroy January 6th documents? And why do Democrats continue to get away with destroying evidence? Hillary acid washes emails and takes hammers to iPhones. Obama's IRS accidentally erased records. And in a vicious legal twist, Biden's prosecutor, Jack Smith, cracked into Donald Trump's Twitter account. Smith got a search warrant from Obama-Biden D.C. judges, and Elon Musk handed over Trump's Twitter account. And no one told Trump. It was all done in the dark. Former president had this to say: just found out that crooked Joe Biden's DOJ secretly attacked my Twitter account, making it a point not to let me know about this major hit on my civil rights. My political opponent is going crazy trying to infringe on my campaign for president. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Does the First Amendment still exist? Did deranged Jack Smith tell the unselects to destroy and delete all evidence? These are dark days in America. So the Democrats broke into his campaign, his house, and his Twitter account, and they destroyed nearly half the January 6th evidence that Trump needs to defend himself at trial.
And that was Jesse Waters. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Jesse Waters.
Kamala Harris was in Philadelphia today talking about her most cherished thing.
Workers are building electric buses so people can get where they need to go.
What the vice president didn't tell you was America's biggest electric bus company just went belly up. The company's called Proterra, and it filed for bankruptcy this week. Proterra was Biden and Kamala's golden boy. It was the company that was supposed to eradicate diesel. Taxpayers were funding it, and now the money's gone. We don't know how many possible hundreds of millions of dollars we lost. We don't know where the money went. But we do know this bankrupt electric bus company had access to at least $8 billion. Democrats thought they picked a winner. Kamala toured their factory. Mayor Pete toured their factory. Even Biden touted it.
We ought to be the single most significant suppliers of electric buses and vehicles in the world. You guys are getting us in the game. It's going to make a lot of difference.
Well, now they're out of the game because the company was a scam. In California, the buses caught on fire. In Philly, they broke down. And in Alaska, the batteries froze in the cold. And in Minnesota, they stalled out on the hills. The wheels on the bus do not go round and round. And it takes a year to fix an electric bus because the parts are so rare. So why would the Democrats invest so much political capital and taxpayer capital in a broken electric bus company? Because it was a pump and dump scheme. Al Gore had millions invested in the company while he was lobbying the White House to herald it. George Soros had over $20 million invested in Proterra. Jennifer Granholm, Biden's energy secretary, sat on the company's board. She held stock in Proterra while she was secretary, and then sold it for about $1.5 million. Joe Biden even put the Proterra CEO on a prestigious government board. And reports say Proterra insiders dumped their stock before the company went bankrupt. This was a political pump and dump. Cash out before the crash. Proterra stock is now worth 17 cents a share. This is like Solyndra. House Republicans need to launch an immediate investigation into this taxpayer-funded scam that Biden donors and cronies made a fortune from.
And that was Jesse Waters. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now Byron-Donalds.
FBI and the IRS's investigation, the amount of money, the number of countries, the number of companies actually eerily matches what the Oversight Committee has been able to uncover over the last several months. So this is key for the American people. If the investigative committee, that is the A-team, that does this with respect to international tax evasion and tax evasion, if they're coming out with the same numbers that the Oversight Committee is coming out with, then we know we have the facts. And Joe Biden, Hunter Biden have been lying to the American people for years over this stuff, and I stress years.
And that was Byron-Donalds. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Loeren-Boebert.
America is exceptional because of her people. Exceptional people in this room throughout the country. And I, for one, am very proud of American exceptionalism. And I know that you are too. I love that you won't back down and you confront lies with truth. That is what we need. There has been a moral decay in our country because too many of our leaders have traded the truth for a lie. But you speaking up and exposing that and speaking truth to power is changing the tides. America.
And that was Loeren-Boebert. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Vivek-Ramaswamy.
You ask somebody my age that question, what does it mean to be an American? You get a blank stare in response. That is the vacuum. That is the void. And now is our moment to deliver an answer to that question, what it means to be an American that dilutes the woke agenda to irrelevance. Let's talk about it. What does it mean to be an American? It means we believe in meritocracy, the pursuit of excellence, that you get ahead in this country, not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions. That is why we will end affirmative action in every sphere of American life. It is a cancer on our national soul. It means we believe in the rule of law, that your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. That is why we will use the U.S. military to secure our own southern border. That is what it means to defend this country. It means we believe that the people we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government, not this bureaucracy, the deep state, the administrative state that runs the show today. And that is why I've said that we're not just going to reform these agencies. When these agencies, from the Department of Education to the FBI, to the ATF, to the IRS, shouldn't have never existed in the first place. We will not just reform them, we will shut them down. That is what it means to live in a constitutional republic.
And that was Vivek-Ramaswamy. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, inside Delta Force.
We were then instructed to fall out in 30 minutes with a 40-pound rucksack, emergency kit packed inside, a compass, and 1 C-ration meal. At formation, we were given a color and number as our individual identification codes and a map sheet of Fort Bragg. We were assigned to trucks by color and number. I couldn't detect any pattern in the assignments. Normal Army method would be to put all reds on one truck, all blues on another, all greens on yet another. Or at least, if mixing color groups, the numbers would run in sequence. The arbitrariness of this was obviously purposeful. For a reason I couldn't explain, I liked it. Our convoy of trucks moved out of the compound and scattered in all directions as soon as we hit the road. Some went left and some went right. One moved straight across the highway and stopped. As our group continued on, a truck would turn off here or there until we, too, pulled off onto a sand trail and eventually came to a stop in a choking miasma of dust. The driver opened the tailgate, and a cadre member told us to dismount, but stay on the other side of the truck until he called us forward, 4 at a time, each with a different color. I was in the first group called forward, and as we approached, he pointed out a spot for each color and told us we would find our instructions on a sheet of paper at our spot. I moved to the place he indicated, a large persimmon tree about 20 meters away, and found an acetate-covered sheet of paper tacked to the base of the tree. The sheet was marked with my color and had a set of map coordinates for this location. It also said, "Your next RV is located at," and gave the 8-digit grid coordinates for that point. Below this was printed the overdue time for the day. I sat on my rucksack and transposed both sets of coordinates, marked each location on the map, and wrote the overdue time in the green Army pocket notebook I habitually carried in my shirt pocket. I took out my compass, oriented the map, and was studying the possible routes and calculating distances when the cadre member called me to his location. "Open your map, show me where you are, and show me where you're going," he announced in a flat, matter-of-fact tone. I picked up a twig from the ground, and using it as a pointer, said, "I am here and am going there," pointing to each location in turn with the twig. "Okay," he replied, and looked into my face with a deadpan stare. "Have a good 'un." I made no reply, just nodded, shouldered my rucksack, took my initial compass bearing, and set out on the first steps into the unknown. I picked a pace that, given the terrain and the offsets of my route, could move me to my destination at about 5 kilometers an hour. It was a pace that covered ground well enough, but was also one I could maintain with the load I was carrying for a long, long time. I had to move fast, but not burn myself out, because I didn't have any idea when I would finish. That initial leg was about 6 kilometers. Along the way, I saw 1 or 2 other guys scurrying along different routes. We studiously ignored each other and continued on our respective paths. The day was warm, but not hot, and the air was dry. There was even a little bit of a breeze blowing as I crossed the tops of the broad, low hills. The ruck was settled on my back, and I soon worked up a good sweat. There were no landmines. No one was shooting artillery or machine guns at me. I had no one to worry about other than myself. I was healthy, strong, and moving well on a new adventure. All in all, a pretty damn good day. I was getting close to the RV. I had marked the location at a slight bend of a sand trail that contoured about halfway up a small hill. I saw the point when I was about 25 meters out. As I closed with it, the RV sitter saw me and called, "Color and number." I responded with my code for the day, and the sitter replied, "Roger, Green 6, your instructions are over there," and he pointed to one of the sheets posted about the area. "Water is on the back of the truck. Come and see me when you're ready," he said as he scribbled something on a clipboard. I nodded my acknowledgement and moved to my instruction sheet. All it said was, "Green, your next RV is located at," and gave the 8-digit coordinates of the new location. I plotted the spot on the map and reported to the sitter. "Show me where you are and show me where you're going," he directed. I did so, received the inevitable "have a good 'un," and moved out sharply on the new route. The rest of the day was much the same. The legs between RVs were 4 to 7 kilometers in length. The terrain stayed pretty much the same, except for one good-sized creek I had to wade. Occasionally, I would cross paths with other candidates, but otherwise I was alone. It was a good workout, vigorous, but not overly demanding. My only apprehension was a slight worry about whether I was moving fast enough, but I knew this was a good pace. I was covering ground quickly, and my navigation was accurate. I could go faster if I had to, but that raised the risk of getting hurt or becoming over-fatigued, and my navigation becoming sloppy. I arrived at my 6th RV in the late afternoon and called out my color and number as soon as the sitter looked up at my approach. "Roger, Green 6. Go across the road to those pines, take off your rucksack, and sit down." He pointed to a clump of pines about 30 meters away. I stood there uncertainly for a second and asked, "Am I finished?" He merely repeated, "Go across the road to those pines, take off your rucksack, and sit down." He said it in a level, calm voice, as if I had never caused him to repeat his statement. No exasperation, no snideness, no emphasis, just the statement of instructions. "Right," I said as I moved away. "Just do as you're told and don't ask questions unless the instructions are unclear." I crossed the street and shucked off my rucksack. It felt good to get that bastard off my back. You can become accustomed to carrying a ruck, but it never becomes comfortable. I plucked my canteens from their covers, drained the last one down my throat, and filled them both from one of the water cans nearby. Then I sat down and leaned back against my ruck, propped my feet up a tree, and thought about the day as I sipped a canteen. This must be the finish point for the day, and I must be doing okay, I thought. I'm the only one here, so I must be first. No, maybe I'm late, and a truckful has already gone in. No, that can't be right. To get here faster than I did, you'd have to run all day. But maybe the others didn't come from my starting point. Maybe they came from other points and had different legs. Maybe hell. I don't know, and I'm not going to worry about it or waste energy trying to figure it out. I'll just do my best, and if that's not good enough, they can send me home. But within a few minutes, another guy showed up at the RV and came over to the rest spot under the pines. I had not seen him before now. We introduced ourselves as he dropped his ruck and settled down. His name was Ron Kardowski, and he was a tall, lean master sergeant stationed with the 10th Special Forces in Bad Tölz, Germany. Bad Tölz is one of my favorite places, and I have many friends stationed there, so we chatted about mutual acquaintances, favorite ski slopes, and Bavarian gasthouses as more candidates began to arrive at our location. After a half hour or so, there were about 15 men lounging in the shade of the pine grove. A little later, a deuce and a half pulled up, and the RV sitter told us to climb aboard. One guy had to ask if the truck was going back to camp, and he seemed a little put out when the sitter merely repeated, "Get on the truck." The guy climbed aboard, muttering to himself. I retreated into myself as the truck bounced along the dusty sand trail and thought about that guy, about my question, "Am I finished?" and other things I had noticed. The factor of the unknown was subtly but persistently at work here. The Army lives and operates on published schedules. In peacetime, the document that regulates life is the unit training schedule. The training schedule is published weekly and announces each day's activity in detail, time of formations, hourly activities, uniform requirements, classes and the names of the instructors, activity locations, meal times and what type rations are provided, special notes, and what time the duty day ends. Other notices, such as the duty roster, round out these detailed instructions. For field and combat operations, the operations order provides all the instructions for the conduct of foreseen activities. As most people suspect, military life is a highly regulated affair, and for experienced soldiers, that amount of regulation gives a certain sense of comfort. It provides the framework they need to plan, conduct, and pursue their duties and their lives. The inevitable changes wrought on the training schedule, just because all things cannot be minutely regulated, always produce some degree of turmoil in a unit. So you can imagine the effect this minimal instruction was having on everyone in the selection course. We were all affected to varying degrees. I have always prided myself on my adaptability and my ability to overcome obstacles, but I could feel a sense of anxiety about the unknowns of this course hovering in the back of my mind. What was going to happen next? Was I moving fast enough? How long was it all going to last? Were there spies in the course, watching, listening, and reporting back to the cadre? I thought about these things and others on the truck ride and came to the conclusion that I didn't give a damn about any of them. The factor of the unknown was exhilarating, and I enjoyed it. I always have. But one of us had reached a different conclusion by the time our truck arrived back at camp. He was a well-built, tough-looking Sergeant First Class, serving on drill sergeant duty with a basic training brigade. When we piled off the truck, he went to the cadre member standing nearby and reported that he wished to voluntarily withdraw from the course. Those of us present were surprised to see it happen. This guy was no slouch. The cadre member merely directed him to the orderly room for out-processing and then told the rest of us that instructions were on the bulletin board. Word filtered out later that he told Sergeant Major Shoemate he was jacking it in because he couldn't stand not knowing what he would be doing, not just after the next event, but the next day and the day after that. He said he realized he required structure and organization, and that this just wasn't for him. I never saw him again. I went to the hooch to put my gear away, had a good shower, and enjoyed an excellent supper. The meals here were extraordinarily good. Later that evening, they were showing a movie in the mess hall. Marathon Man. The next 6 days were much like the first one. Point to point, I covered just about the entire western half of Fort Bragg. Every day we had a different color and number, and every day we started and finished with a different group. Some days had fewer RVs to hit, but the legs were longer and more difficult. Some days saw more RVs, and one time I was nearing the overdue time when I finally finished. The end of some days found as many as 20 of us at the final RV, but on another day, only 4 of us got on the same truck back to camp. Cadre members would show up for a day and then disappear. But no matter who they were, the RV sitters always acted the same, with a calm, deliberate, dispassionate, just the facts, ma'am demeanor. You never saw any of them get ruffled or have the slightest flutter in their composure. They didn't smile, they didn't frown, and they didn't gesture, but they always watched. Everything happened when it was supposed to. If the bulletin board announced truck departure at 0600 hours, they rolled at 0600. If someone missed the truck, he was never seen or spoken of again. The steady disappearance of men was downright eerie, made noticeable only by the diminished size of the crowd each night in the mess hall. No one saw them leave, no one heard them leave, they were just gone. The midnight hook, as we called the mechanism behind these vanishing acts, had already snatched 3 old comrades of mine. I was reading the Gulag Archipelago, so perhaps my antennae were somewhat sensitive to the mystery of disappearing men. Day 7 was a very short day. We returned to camp at 1300 hours and headed straight to the classroom for another round of psychological testing. It felt peculiar, sitting at a school desk, dog-tired and soaked through with sweat, methodically taking a written examination knowing you'd never see the results. All you'd be able to do was wonder if you had passed, failed, or fallen somewhere in between. There was a formation that evening after chow. Major Odessa, the Iron Major, as I thought of him, was in charge. Men, this last week has been a practice session. Some of you have been away from tactical units for a while and needed to hone your navigational skills. Some men, who have since departed, didn't really want to be here and just needed a little time to realize that fact. Up until now, the only men who have returned to their units have been those too injured to carry on or those who have voluntarily withdrawn from the course. That all changes tomorrow. Holding himself perfectly still, he paused, as if gathering his thoughts. I held my breath and felt myself freeze along with him. Then he continued, and I breathed again. Tomorrow you begin stress phase. You will be relocating to a remote mountainous field location. You will be bivouacking in the open. Prepare for a 10-day stay in the field and pack your duffel bag accordingly. All meals will be sea rations. Potable water will be provided. Do not drink from any streams or other bodies of water. After this formation, you will report to the supply room to draw a weapon and the map sheets you will need. Keep those items with you at all times. You will carry your weapon in your hand. They do not have slings attached, and you will not rig a sling or tie the weapon to your body. Replace or draw any additional equipment you need this evening. Pack anything you will not need for the field and store it in the supply room. Privately owned vehicles will stay here. As of tomorrow, your movement between RVs will be timed, and you will be judged against a set time standard for movement. Do not worry yourself trying to determine what that time standard is. Just do the best you can. There are those of you here now who will fail to meet course standards and will be removed from the selection course for that failure. Those men will be returned to their units with a copy of a letter that will go to their commanding officer declaring that man to be both an exemplary soldier and a credit to his unit, but not unfortunately selected for service with this unit at this time. Indeed, all of you are excellent soldiers, or you would not still be here. Things have been rather easy until now. The difficulty will increase tomorrow. Pay attention, follow instructions, and do your best. That's all we require. Since there are no questions, you are released to prepare for tomorrow. Additional instructions are posted on the bulletin board. Have a good one.
And that was the next part of In the Beginning from Inside Delta Force by Command Sergeant Major Retired Eric-haney. Back in a minute. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. And until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.